Did you know that dozens, if not hundreds of people attested to Elvis Presley's powers as a faith healer? Did you further know that Elvis had UFO encounters, or that he was a seeker and a student of theosophy and various other occult traditions? And I don't mean in a shallow, trite, or Madonna-esque way. I mean, he was very sincere about this. He read some rather obscure books. He was very sincere in his meditation and prayer practices. He lived this stuff for a good portion of his life. And did you also know, craziest of all, that Elvis was naturally blonde? like of everything else, that might have blown me away more than anything else. Elvis was naturally blonde. He started dyeing his hair with black shoe polish when he was like in his teens. His family had no money. Obviously, once he graduated being the most famous man in the world, he graduated from the shoe polish, but he actually dyed his hair black. He was a natural blonde. That just completely blew me away. But anyway, these are all things that I did not know before, but I know now because of Occult Elvis by Miguel Connor. Now, most, if not all of you, know who Miguel Connor is. He's the front man, or the man. He is Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio. He's been a guest on this channel before. He narrated a couple of my short stories back in the day, too. Miguel is just a great guy. I'm sure most of you are at least somewhat familiar with him. He just released this book, and I gotta say, it's the book that I didn't know I needed. And it's an interesting thing because I am very interested in music history. I've had a freelance gig, actually, where I write about music history, and I've had it for years. So I love music history. It's something I'm passionate about and interested in, but I never really cared about Elvis. It wasn't that I like Elvis's music, and I definitely understand his role in his transformative role in American history, or really just world history. But he never really interested me as a person. I think I just looked at him like, yeah, pretty boy from the South, gyrates the hips, turns the chicks on, does too many substances, dies early. Like, I just didn't really, I guess I just never assumed there was, or I just never thought there was all that much more depth to him. But I was very wrong about that. Elvis was a very intelligent, well-read, and like I said, a sincere seeker of all kinds of spiritual traditions, and including when it got him in some hot water with his friends and family and with the public. Some of these corners that he was delving into, they ruffled some feathers and they bothered some people. But he stuck to his guns because he believed in it. For most of it, Miguel talks about one point where he loses this friendship and kind of walks away from the whole thing for a little bit, but he found his way back to it. But there is a lot more to Elvis than I had thought. Before I get into this book, something I want to say for those of you who maybe aren't, real into history that goes back that far. Something you need to understand about Elvis was to call him a music star is it's an absurd euphemism. He was like an icon in a way that I don't know if any other American or even global entertainer has ever reached the level of just cultural power that Elvis Presley had. I mean, John Lennon of the Beatles, obviously, that's another very transformative cultural force. But John Lennon himself said before Elvis Presley, there was nothing. You look at all those guys, they were all inspired by Elvis. So you really need to understand how the magnitude of what his presence and what his life meant. I mean, he changed American culture, which influenced all of Western culture, which then influenced all of global culture. The reason why I say that is that in the book, Occult Elvis, Miguel dives deep into all of there's a lot of recorded information about, like I said, the faith healing, UFO encounters, psychic encounters, or psychic experiences, paranormal things. Like, from the time he was very young, Elvis was this liminal figure, kind of existing at the crossroads. That's something that Miguel comes back to in the book a lot, like Elvis at the crossroads. The crossroads with the blues and the voodoo, the American hoodoo traditions. The whole idea of selling your soul at the crossroads having these magical powers to them. But it also goes to, when we're talking research into shamans and all of these things, how they go into liminal places, and there's this whole idea that liminality itself, places in between places, have some kind of mystical force to them. Elvis was basically born that way. Maybe the most dramatic example of that is that he actually had a twin who died at birth. But Elvis never got over it psychologically, but he also was like, he carried his twin with him, like in his like spirit. It was like a mystical connection that the two had. Really fascinating, but it's obvious that Elvis was set apart from the start to be one of these culturally transformative figures. And what I was getting to earlier was Miguel. He goes into all, like I said, he goes into all of these really interesting little tidbits and the background of these interests that Elvis had and these powers that he displayed. But the book is really more than that. The thesis of the book is that Elvis was, whatever these forces are that are moving society and culture and just human development around, whatever these forces are, they every once in a while they seem to snatch someone from the crowd and say, hey kid, you're going to change culture or technology or theology, something. You're going to be one of these like once in a generation transformative agents. And that that interests me because I've always thought of Bob Dylan that way, and I've actually thought of writing my own book about Bob Dylan that way. But so when I read about Elvis, kind of in the same idea, it really intrigued me. It really resonated with me, because what Miguel is saying is that Elvis, he was this force who came down and was kind of this lightning rod for all of these various forces. And through him, culture was changed forever. I mean, it was. And even if we circle back, people say everything's cyclical. Maybe things will cycle back to a culture that was more like the culture before Elvis. Even if that happens, we still have to cycle back, right? Like his influence can never be taken away. And it really can't be underestimated. And so that's the thesis that Miguel puts forth in the book. And I find it to be a very intriguing idea. But I would say what's interesting to me is beyond that idea, beyond these interesting factoids. And is that considered like I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I don't know if like that word is meant to like diminish. Maybe I should not be using that word, factoid. But he just has all of this information about Elvis. And then like I said, there's like the larger overarching thesis. But honestly, for me, what I came away from the book with the greatest appreciation for, and there were many things I loved about the book, but more than anything for me is my appreciation of Elvis Presley as a human being grew dramatically. He was an amazing guy. Even at the height of his fame and his power, he still had a very real and sincere. He cared about people, like the guy driving the bus, the people carrying his bags, just strangers all around him. He really cared about people. He wanted to help people, and he was really kind of a tortured, he was a tortured soul. And it's kind of circling back to what I was saying earlier about how certain figures seem to be plucked out of the crowd, and it's like the gods turn the spotlight on them and say, hey, you're going to be one of the people that transforms everything. It's easy to be envious of that, and to be jealous of that. But the thing is, those characters, they tend to be people who are just like haunted, and where nothing they achieve so much, and yet it's never enough. Like you look at like Nikola Tesla and all these figures who are driven to work themselves to death and yet never feel like they have met their potential. So that was my impression of what Elvis was like. Despite all of the things that he achieved as an entertainer, both as a musician and as a rock star and just as a cultural icon, and he reached these levels while still managing to be a decent human being that cared very deeply for friends and family, and like I said, even just strangers. To me, that's the most amazing of his accomplishments at all, that he was able to hold on to that core of himself while being propped up as basically a demigod on earth. These figures, they're haunted, and that was my impression of Elvis after reading this book. Despite everything that he achieved, he felt like he hadn't done enough. And the thing is, my impression is that he never really was able to settle on exactly what he thought he was supposed to do here. And imagine how crazy that is to reach the absolute peak of your field. And in his case, it's music, which is, I mean, is there any field in terms of the sensory experiences you're going to get? I mean, the women, the parties, the paparazzi, all of those things. There aren't many achievements that are going to give you a more bang for the buck than being the number one culture, the musician of your time, or actor, or whatever, just like your cultural figure. I mean, that's the kind of success that they reap and enjoy is just different from like somebody that's in, you know, science or technology or something like that. And yet, I don't think he ever really. My impression from reading Miguel's book is that he couldn't even figure out if that was worthwhile. You know, there was a part of him that was like, should I just be helping people? Should I be devoting everything to spirituality, to healing? So he was a tortured soul who, despite achieving so much, it seems like he felt he had never done nearly enough. And that seems to be how all of those figures are that are plucked out of the crowd like that. And so, anyway, it's a fantastic book. Like I said, I walked away with a deep appreciation for Elvis as a man. You can read this book for the really amazing oddities of the experiences that Elvis had that most people don't know about. Like, even mainstream Elvis fans aren't aware, I'm sure, of all of these wild, paranormal, supernatural things that happen. Or you can go along for the ride of the greater thesis that, you know, these forces had plucked him out to be this transformative agent, or just to learn about him as a man. No matter what, no matter which way you look at it, I thought it was all worthwhile. I think it's a great book, very well written. I highly recommend it. So, and Miguel Connor's a great guy. So you buy the book, you're also supporting a really good dude. So that's about it, my friends. Peace out.